Welcome back, everyone. We're breaking down UFC Fight Night, Brunson versus Till. It's a decent card, but you guys know the drill already. Absolutely just atrocious night for me, minus 14 units. Bookies absolutely feasted on me last night, and just going to cut right into it. No dancing around this. So, kicking off the night, I had a parlay and a bet on Martinez to win, and he definitely looked a bit flat that performance. Still was able to pull off the W, but didn't really matter because the other leg of the parlay, DeCarico, basically just got starched in the first round. And, not much else to say about that. That was always a concern with Al Hassan. The guy's got crazy power, crazy finishing upside in that first round. And he was able to catch DeCarico. But, I feel like in most fights and most scenarios, we don't see that happen. And we see DeCarico coast to a pretty comfortable decision. But, in this scenario, it did. And you got to move on from it because this is MMA. This is going to happen. And with Al Hassan, that knockout is always live. But moving along, did also drop the Emmers fight, which, Emmers just showing really bad fight IQ. And I kind of gave him an excuse in the Chikadze fight. But, once again, it kind of reared its ugly head here. And, I feel like the read wasn't terrible. I did feel Emmers had the advantage on the feet, but, he decided to engage Sabatini in the guard. Decided to go for the toe hold instead of just looking to stand up when it was clear he had the advantage on the feet. And, I just don't get why fighters do that. He had Sabatini hurt. The engaging in his guard's a little questionable. And then not only that, you decide to attack the legs and leave your legs, exposed like that. Aside from just completely throwing the fight, you're just putting your career in jeopardy when you're doing that. So, really rough for Emmers. I hope he's able to make a full recovery, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to fully come back from that. But moving along, the only bright spot in the card, J.J. Aldrich and Dustin Jacoby, had them both in a parlay. And, I'll admit it, I didn't really tape the Aldrich fight until like a bit later in the week. I saw the odds for it initially, and, I was in the middle of doing some of the other, taping some of the other fights, so I didn't really go to it until I had finished the previous, or this upcoming card's fights. So, yeah, after I did tape, though, I realized that, there still was a bit of value on Aldrich. I didn't really see her losing this fight. Demopoulos is a bit of a punching bag. I don't think she's really all that skilled at all. And she is coming up a weight class on short notice. I felt that Aldrich would basically just be able to tee off on her. And, she more or less did. The fight was a little closer than I expected. I thought Aldrich would just basically just run through her, honestly. But, she got a pretty comfortable decision there. And, I decided to parlay her up with Jacoby just because I didn't really want to play her straight at like minus 400. So put her in a parlay with Jacoby. Basically, the reasoning for that was I did think Jacoby was going to win. Didn't see like a crazy amount of value on his line, so decided to just kind of soften up the odds a little bit there. And, Jacoby did win pretty resoundingly. It was more or less a standing KO. Basically, the only bet I was able to cash last night. The rest of it is pretty much downhill from there, so we'll keep moving along. Sam Alvey, Wellington Turman. Took a little bit on Alvey by knockout here, or actually inside the distance, I think. But, with how reckless Turman is and, having a suspect chin, I thought that Sam Alvey might catch him. But, didn't think it'd be too likely, which is why I only put like a small bet on it. So not much else to say there. Moving along, Mahmoud Muradov, Gerald Meerschaert. So this was a big, I think, blunder on Muradov's end, right? He didn't fight the way I expected him to. He came out guns blazing. I think he was just looking for the knockout. Probably saw what Chimaev did against Meerschaert and was just looking for highlight reel KO, and instead just fought really recklessly. I think he was over swinging on a lot of his shots. And, Meerschaert was able to capitalize, was able to keep it competitive on the feet just because Muradov, I don't think he fought to the best of his ability. He didn't really fight like he did against some of his other opponents. I feel that if Muradov had just stayed, technically sound in there, defensively sound in there, and just picked his shots, he would have had a much easier time. But, he kept Meerschaert in there, and it definitely looked like Muradov was, starting to tire out, just throwing those bombs early in the fight. And it did say I felt the only way Meerschaert would win was if Muradov kind of did something stupid and gave up the sub. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, he came in just way too aggressive in there and ended up I guess, tiring himself out, and then Meerschaert ended up finding the sub. So really unfortunate that happened. I think, with the proper game plan, Muradov definitely could have gotten a pretty easy win over Meerschaert. And then moving along, Petroski-Gilmour. So not one I had too much on, just had a little sprinkle on Gilmour in round 2 and round 3. I felt that since Petroski does slow down, Gilmour might be able to capitalize. Obviously, I don't think it happens at a high clip, which is why I only put 0.1 unit on it. So Petroski did slow down like I expected. Unfortunately, Gilmour was just way too awful of a fighter to really capitalize on it. Basically, he didn't really push the pace when Petroski was tired. He kind of just sat back and looked for counters, looked for leg kicks in that second round, and basically just let Petroski get back into the fight. Petroski, he was pretty tired, but Gilmour never really capitalized on it. Petroski was able to just kind of stay at distance and basically take that second round off and recover to hit that takedown in the third round and pretty much just dominate. And moving along, Daniel Rodriguez, Kevin Lee. So this one I just completely botched in regards to the read and just some of the bets that I took, right? So I completely misread the size discrepancy between the two. I had felt that Kevin Lee going up, despite being a little smaller, wouldn't be completely outsized because, he is a pretty big, muscular guy still really big long arms, crazy reach. The way he's able to just lock his arms up, he's going to be able to hit takedowns. But, Rodriguez putting up a lot of resistance. But, I think the main turning point for that fight was Kevin Lee getting a bit sloppy in that second round. So, Lee had a really dominant first round. That second round, he had the back taken of Rodriguez, but he got just overzealous with it. He didn't secure the position and basically allowed Rodriguez to reverse him. And that kind of screwed Kevin Lee up because he basically had to use the rest of his energy just fighting off Lee from, top position and working his way up to his feet, as opposed to, spending the remainder of the round just backpacking Rodriguez and looking for the submission there. But that kind of just comes back to the size discrepancy in this matchup, right? Because Lee might have been able to get away with that against some smaller lightweights, but against a natural welterweight, you can't really do that. And that was a fight-ending mistake for Lee there. I think that had Lee not gotten so careless there, he might have been able to just backpack Rodriguez for the remainder of the round and win the round that way, or maybe just get the submission even. But yeah, that kind of fucked him. And I also ended up putting a bet on the fight doesn't go the distance. That was supposed to be a little bit of an insurance play, and it completely backfired on me. I felt that Lee would be live for the submission, but if he doesn't get it, I think that Rodriguez would be live for the knockout as well. But it would appear that maybe Lee moving up might have helped his chin out a little bit, although he was wobbled pretty badly at certain points. So yeah, dropped the ball pretty badly there. And then lastly we had Barboza over Chikadze. So, not really too much to say about this. I had a weird feeling going into this fight that, all the signs kind of pointed at Barboza winning. But, deep down I had a really, really weird feeling Chikadze was going to take it. But Barboza, he didn't look too bad in there. I think what it kind of came down to was maybe just the youth and the athleticism of Chikadze, which I had kind of underestimated. And those fight miles on Barboza really starting to add up. But yeah, that should cap off the recap. So, honestly, a pretty rough event. And, this will be, I think, the third event in the past month and a half that I've lost over 10 units, which is, it's really bad, honestly. Gonna really have to go back to the drawing board or maybe even take a little break. But the work's already been done for this card. So without further ado, let's just get right into the Till Brunson card. And moving along, we have Jack Shore versus Ludovic Sholinian. And this is another fight that got put together relatively short notice. I only have one book that has a line out on it right now. And right now it's saying Jack Shore is at minus 285, Sholinian at plus 225. And taking a look at each of these fighters, so with Shore, the guy is primarily a grappler. Not a lot of offense on the feet, honestly, mainly just throwing some kicks out there. But again, he is primarily a grappler. He's got a good reactive takedown. He's got good timing on his entries. When he's got his hands on you, he'll generally look to take the back. He's pretty aggressive with it. And when he does, have the fight. When he does have his opponent on the ground, he will generally look for the ground and pound, and will hunt the sub as well. He's someone that could definitely put on a grappling pace. He's got pretty good cardio, has been able to grapple pretty hard for 3 good rounds. And, Shore's just not someone you want on top of you. But if he isn't able to get the fight to the ground, he does seem to struggle a bit. And we saw that a bit versus Azure, where, Azure did a really good job of keeping the fight standing and was actually giving Shore a lot of trouble on the feet. But Shore did or was able to edge it out a bit. He was able to kind of just grind up on Azure, even though he didn't get a lot of control. Well, so even though he wasn't able to take him down and hold him down, he did get a lot of control time, just like along the fence and stuff. So yeah, he was able to edge it out, but that was a much closer fight than I had thought it would play out to be prior to it happening. So that definitely is something to keep in mind going forward. I think a good striker with good takedown defense definitely can give Shore a lot of trouble going forward. But as far as this matchup goes, I don't think it'll be too big of an issue. Sholinian is primarily a grappler as well. He honestly doesn't look that great on the feet, but it does seem like he's a bit more comfortable striking than, say, Shore. I'd say probably a little too comfortable sometimes, because even though I feel sometimes he's losing pretty soundly on the feet, he'll look to continue to keep the fight standing instead of looking to get the fight to the ground. But as far as his grappling goes, though, I think that it's not great or anything. His entries definitely seem a little slow and sloppy, kind of telegraphed. But once he's on top, he is pretty heavy there. Generally will look to pass card, occasionally throw some ground and pound. But yeah, I just don't think he's quite at the level of Shore at the moment. And, taking a look at this matchup, it's pretty interesting because, it is a grappler versus grappler matchup. But, like I said before, I do feel that Shore is just much, much better. I think that his timing is much better. I think he's much better with the control. He's just a lot more fluid on the ground. I feel his cardio is also a bit better. And, Shore is just much more reliable to initiate the grappling as well. Whereas, like I mentioned before with Sholinian will, keep a fight standing a bit longer than it needs to. And we haven't really seen too much from the defensive grappling of either fighter, but I suspect that Shore will probably be the one, pressuring, be the one looking for the takedowns. I honestly see him just having a lot of success there. And, even if Sholinian is the one looking to take Shore down, I think Shore can probably get a sweep or just deny a lot of the grappling of Sholinian. And I feel that if this is going to be a very high-paced grappling fight, I do favor the cardio of Shore much more than Sholinian. Sholinian has shown to slow down against much lower-level fighters and fighting at a much lower pace. So this is a spot where I feel that a round 2 or round 3 sub or ground and pound finishes live for Shore. I think that he definitely will start to wear on Sholinian, and Sholinian being the fighter coming in short notice, not having great cardio to begin with, I do think that Shore can potentially break him in the later rounds. So the pick obviously is going to be Shore here. I don't know if I'll bet him straight this price. I might look to put him in some parlays, but I am looking at the round 2, round 3 props for Shore. So the pick here for me is Shore, and I have him getting it done by round 3 submission. And moving right along, we have Charles Jourdain versus Julian Erosa. And this fight literally just got announced. I don't think there's any lines on it just yet, so we'll go ahead and line this in a bit here. But taking a look at Jourdain, he is primarily a striker. He's got pretty high volume, and I have seen him load up quite a bit on a lot of his shots, but he is generally able to push a pace. Does seem to have some power as well. And, I feel that Jourdain's one of these fighters that probably doesn't cut a ton of weight, which is how he's able to wing a lot of these power shots and still, push a pretty crazy pace. I could be wrong about that, but I just feel that sometimes when you're not cutting a lot of weight and you have like decent cardio, you could definitely put a lot more power into your shots. But that's just how I feel. I don't know if there's any actual evidence for that. But going back to Jourdain, like I was saying, the guy wings a lot of his shots, which does leave a lot of openings. Whether it's him just eating counter shots or just being able to, or just being, taken down. Some of his wildness definitely bites him in the ass sometimes. And I don't actually think his takedown defense or defensive grappling is bad. It's just that with some of his wild striking, his opponents are able to hit just reactive takedowns on him. And we kind of saw that happen in his fight against Fili, where Fili was just able to hit multiple takedowns on Jourdain just because Jourdain was overswinging on a lot of his punches. And that kind of cost him the match, right? Because I feel that Jourdain was getting the better of Fili in a lot of the exchanges. It's just, he got taken down multiple times that really swung the rounds in Fili's favor. So, yeah, I feel that if Jourdain is able to tighten up his striking a bit, he could definitely be a problem for a lot of guys in the division. But as it stands right now, he's still a pretty fun, exciting fighter to watch. Lots of offense, lots of output. But, not very good defensively, which, can catch up to him. But, he's still pretty young, pretty durable. So he can definitely afford to take a few shots, but it's not going to be very sustainable. And, talking about a fighter taking a lot of shots, we have Julian Erosa, who is coming in short notice, which, I don't think is a really good idea because, Erosa is coming off a pretty nasty knockout, and he's going to be going up against Jourdain, who does have some power. And, short notice, I don't know, man. It doesn't seem like a really smart fight to be coming in short notice for, but, he's doing it. So, good on him, I guess. But Erosa, he's another fighter who is pretty fun to watch as well. He likes to move forward and throw volume. He's a bit of a glass cannon, as he generally does like to trade in the pocket, but it's not a good idea because the guy's chin is definitely a bit suspect. He's been knocked out on multiple occasions and is actually coming off of a pretty nasty knockout just recently against what's his name, the Korean guy, Sung Woo Choi, and I believe we did take Sung Woo Choi inside the distance there. But yeah, look, Erosa's a really fun fighter, all action guy. Defense isn't great, but we'll put on a show. So yeah, this fight should be fireworks. Should be a lot of back and forth. Pretty high-paced fight. Erosa is the bigger guy in there, but I just don't think he's someone who really uses his length all that well. He's someone, despite being like 6'1" or 6'2" or something, is going to look to trade in the pocket. And if that happens, I do favor the durability of Jourdain a bit, although Erosa, he does have some power. It's just that, if you're able to connect on him, you can definitely put him out. But taking a look at this matchup, I do feel that it should be pretty competitive on the feet, at least until Erosa gets knocked out, right? Because that's always a possibility with Erosa, especially against heavy hitters. So, yeah, I do have to favor Jourdain here. He's the one, that's got a full camp here. He's going to be the younger, fresher fighter, whereas with Erosa, even though he's got good offensive striking, his durability is a massive concern. And as far as how I'd line the fight, though, I'd say like maybe like minus 150, minus 160 Jourdain. I just feel that, a lot of the striking exchanges are going to be close, but I do have to give like the knockout upside to Jourdain because of obviously the durability concerns again with Erosa. But if Erosa doesn't get knocked out, this is actually a pretty close fight, I think. So I think that on the feet it's probably going to be 50-50, but Jourdain's going to have the knockout upside. So, I'd line Jourdain at around like minus 150, minus 160. But knowing some of the bookies and how they've priced Jourdain, sometimes I wouldn't be surprised if Jourdain's like a minus 300 favorite. But, if he is, I might have to take a shot on Erosa. But as it stands right now, I would say Jourdain, minus 150 or so. But as far as how this fight is going to play out, I do think that Jourdain takes this. I can see him winning a pretty close decision or just being able to straight up knock Erosa out. And in the next fight, we have Jonathan Martinez versus Marcelo Rojo. Shit, I remember struggling last time with his name too, but I'll just call him Rojo. So, Martinez is the minus 157 favorite. Comeback on Rojo is plus 137. So I guess we'll start with Rojo first. I'm actually just going to call him Rojo because Rojo just sounds kind of funny. I'm going to have a hard time getting through this. So, Rojo is primarily a striker. I've seen him look to just pump the jab out. Likes to keep his lead hand out, look for the straight right, just line it up. Does seem to have a bit of power, at least on the regional scene. We'll have to see how this translates to the UFC. since he's only got one fight so far. And that was a fight against Charles Jourdain, who is on the same card as well. And, he gave a decent account of himself, considering he was coming in short notice that fight. But, he got battered pretty badly in that fight. So, yeah, that was a rough one for him, actually. But, yeah, not too much else to say about him. His defensive grappling leaves a bit to be desired. But for the sake of this matchup, I do believe that it'll primarily be standing. And, he'll be going up against a pretty interesting opponent in Martinez, who has got a very solid kicking game. He mixes it up very well, whether it's going to the body, leg, or even the head. And it does seem like Martinez is someone who will throw a lot more kicks than punches. He will throw some punches in there when, he finds openings or when, he senses that maybe his opponent's hurt. But generally, he'll throw a lot of kicks, whether it's to kind of maintain distance or just to soften up his opponents. Martinez also has a pretty dangerous knee up the middle. He's got pretty decent timing on it as well. His striking defense generally seems okay, although he is coming off a pretty nasty knockout against Davey Grant. But generally, he does like to just shell up. And, that kind of leaves his body open a lot, which we did see Ewell take advantage of. Ewell had, I think, a bit of success like going to the body when Martinez was shelling up. But taking a look at this matchup, we do have a pretty interesting striker versus striker matchup here. I really do like the kicking game of Martinez, but generally it's just really hard for me to want to back someone who is such a kick-heavy fighter because, unless you're doing like a ton of damage with the leg kicks, it's just really hard for judges to score that over someone who is who's attacking the head a lot more. And just a few examples come to mind, right, where, I feel that if you have a fighter who's maybe throwing 15, 20 leg kicks versus a fighter who is able to land maybe 8 or 9 head shots, I think the refs or the judges will generally favor the fighter, targeting the head a little bit more, right? And, just a few fights that come to mind, I'd say maybe that Ciryl Gane Volkov fight where Volkov really was just getting off on the kicks, but Gane was going to the head a lot more, and he won on the cards, I think, pretty decisively. There's a couple other fights that come to mind. I think the one with Ponzinibbio and Baeza, where Baeza was landing a lot more leg kicks, had Ponzinibbio kind of wobbled a bit, but Ponzinibbio was just landing so much more to the head. And I know there are a few other examples that are escaping me at the moment, but, it does seem pretty obvious, right? They're going to favor the guy who's going to headhunt a bit more. And this could be what happens in this matchup here. Maybe we see Rojo landing a bit more head strikes. Martinez, he's going to land a lot of body kicks, a lot of leg kicks. But, I just don't know if that's going to be enough to overcome some of the damage done by Rojo, going to the head. That said, though, I haven't really been all that impressed with Rojo and what I've seen from him. The guy is extremely hittable, and, he does seem to have some power, but I just don't know if he'll be able to catch Martinez. I don't know if he'll be able to land that much on Martinez either, but, just all in all for this matchup, I do favor Martinez a little bit more. He's got a little more UFC experience, and I do feel that he'll be the fighter who's going to be throwing a bit more. Maybe Rojo will struggle a bit getting in distance when he's just getting kicked at by Martinez. So I guess the pick here for me is going to be Martinez. I have him winning a pretty, comfortable volume-based decision. And in the next fight, we have Mandy Bohm versus Ariane Lipski. And this fight is a pick'em right now, -110 both ways. So starting with Lipski first, she is primarily a striker. Does seem to have a pretty diverse striking attack. Pretty bad defensively, though. Is pretty hittable. But I think the worst thing, obviously, with her is that she's got absolutely dog shit takedown defense. Zero ground game whatsoever. She just looks completely lost on the ground. And I think she's been taken down in pretty much all of her fights, except for the Luana Carolina fight where, that was just the flukiest knee bar ever. But yeah, just on the ground, Lipski just looks completely helpless there. If I remember correctly, I believe I did take De La Rosa over Lipski in her most recent fight. And I did take De La Rosa to win inside the distance as well. Just because I feel that Lipski's ground game is just such a massive liability that someone like De La Rosa, who is a grappler, would be able to fully take advantage. But as far as this fight goes, the first thing I looked for when doing tape on Bohm was, if she's got any sort of grappling game at all. And, from what I have seen, it just does not look good. On the feet, Bohm has got very slow, loopy sort of punches. And, I have seen her work in the clinch a bit. And, in some of the fights that she's in, I've seen her somehow get on top of her opponents, but I don't think she's got particularly great wrestling. I think on a lot of these exchanges, she's kind of able to just get a trip on her opponents and, is somehow able to just fall into their guard. But, overall, I wouldn't say Bohm is a grappler or even a wrestler by any means. He just seems like someone who's maybe just more of an opportunistic grappler. I haven't really seen her look to proactively wrestle. It's just one of these things that just happens for her in these fights. And I would like to see a little more, grappling offense from her before taking a shot on her, especially since, she is making her UFC debut and just overall just has not looked good whatsoever on tape. I feel that the UFC is really wanting Lipski to get a win here, but I just don't know if that's going to happen. But at the same time, I don't know if I really want to pick Bohm here just because she just looks so bad. So if I'm really forced to make a pick here, I think I might just go with Lipski because I feel that on the feet, Lipski is the much better striker. I think she's a lot quicker, a lot sharper in there. But the big thing really is just the horrible defensive grappling. I mean, that's just such a big liability. Even if Bohm isn't a real aggressive grappler, if the fight somehow ends up on the ground, Lipski will have likely lost that round. And again, even though Bohm isn't a very active wrestler or grappler, this is MMA, and if Lipski's throwing a kick and she slips, or if Bohm is somehow able to clinch her up against the fence and get a trip along there and get on top of Lipski, these are all things that could potentially happen. And if it does happen, then Lipski's kind of screwed. Look, I am going to pick Lipski here to win just because I feel that if the fight is just a striking match, I do favor her a bit more. However, as far as just betting tips go, I don't really recommend betting Lipski unless you're getting decent plus money on her just because of how big of a liability her takedown defense is. I think you'd need a bigger payout on Lipski if you're going to put money on her. But that's just my opinion. I am going to still pick Lipski to win. I'll pick her to win by decision, but I don't think I'll be betting her at all. And in this matchup, we have Marc-Andre Barriault versus Dalcha Lungiambula, and Barriault is going to be the minus 145 favorite. Comeback on Lungiambula is plus 125. And I'm just going to call him Dalcha. It's a little easier to say. So with Dalcha, he's got very explosive striking, very heavy hands. He's got big power, but is generally just extremely low volume. And, the guy will just wait for an opening before lunging in for the 1-2 or just look to explode in on the hips and get the fight to the ground. Dalcha does seem a little more comfortable on the ground. He'll generally just look to hold opponents there, just kind of lay on top of them. Will occasionally throw the ground and pound, but is very low volume on the ground too. He definitely prioritizes control over just damage or even looking for the sub. But the reason I feel he's so low volume is because I just don't think his cardio is that good. And I don't think it's really surprising to anyone that it is, right? Because he's just so muscular, so jacked that his heart would probably just explode if he threw more than 3 strikes a minute. So with Dalcha, you just have someone who's, extremely dangerous on the feet, could definitely, put you out. And on top is, very smothering, very heavy on top. And since he's so big and strong, it's really tough for opponents to really get out from underneath him. But he's also fought some really low-level guys, so I don't know if you could really take too much from those performances, but, we do know that the guy is, extremely powerful in there. His opponent, Marc-Andre Barriault, is primarily a striker, generally likes to move forward, pressure his opponents, can put on a pretty high pace, pretty high work rate. His takedown defense isn't particularly great, but it's kind of hard to keep him there. The guy won't accept bottom position, will work really hard to get his way back up to the feet and, look to continue to put on that, striking onslaught. I feel that the fighters that have had the most success against Barriou are ones that have been able to mix in the wrestling, but also keep it competitive on the feet. We saw Jun Yong Park hit multiple takedowns on Barriou and just kind of win based off of that. And, he was actually outstriking Barriou too, but same with Sanchez, who, was able to keep it competitive on the feet, but was able to mix in the wrestling to really like secure rounds. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the archetype to really beat Barriou. And, taking a look at this matchup, I do see Lungiambula kind of being able to do that. But at the same time, I can also see Lungiambula just gassing out because Marc-Andre Barriou is going to make him work to hold him down and secure those takedowns. So yeah, this is a kind of a tough fight for me to really, predict, just because I could see it playing out so many different ways. Like for one, I could definitely see Dalcha just landing a bomb on Barriou on the feet, just knocking him out cold, or possibly even just getting a takedown on Barriou and just controlling him for the majority of the round. We've seen Lungiambula do that pretty successfully against other opponents, but I can also see Barriou just stuffing the takedowns or just continuously working his way back up to the feet and just being able to just touch Dalcha up. And with how low volume Dalcha is, I do see Barriou being able to kind of run away with it on the feet if he is able to keep the fight standing. And ultimately, I do feel that that's probably going to be the more likely scenario. I feel that Barriou is going to be able to keep the fight standing long enough to either knock Dalcha out or win just a volume-based decision. But again, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Dalcha just starches Marc-Andre Barriou or is able to just take him down and control him. But I am leaning towards Barriou being able to work his way back up and just tiring Dalcha out. So the pick here for me is going to be Barriou, but I don't know if I want to bet it just yet. I feel like the line's about right where it is. I think if I can get Barriou at around like pick him, I might bet him. I might even just look at the round 2, round 3 prop for Barriou because, if he is able to keep the fight standing, I do see him being able to put a pace on Dalcha. And I just feel that if Dalcha isn't able to successfully get his grappling game going, or if Barriou is able to continuously just get back to the feet, Dalcha is just going to be way too tired in the second and third rounds. And I could see Barriou just being able to put it on Dalcha later in the fight. So I guess the official pick for me is going to be Barriou, and I'll take him to win by third round TKO. And in the next fight, we have Ji-yeon Kim versus Molly McCann, and this fight should be a banger, and I'm not even saying that sarcastically. As far as women's fights go, this should be a pretty back and forth, pretty high-paced action fight here. So taking a look at the line, it is near a pick'em right now. We have Kim minus 115, McCann minus 105, although most books will probably have it at around like a pick'em. But anyways, taking a look at this matchup, we have Kim, who is, I'd say, a bit more of a counterpuncher, but she is extremely hittable. She kind of reminds me of Korean Zombie a bit, and I'm not just saying that because they're both Korean, but if you just watch the way they fight, it's kind of similar in the sense that, Kim doesn't really move her head as waiting for opponents to throw and then just will throw like a counter shot back. And I think the movement's just very similar, but obviously Zombie's doing it at a much higher level. And whereas, Zombie's got, knockout power, I don't think that Kim really has all that much power. And with how much damage she takes as well, I just don't think it's a very effective style from her. But, she's hasn't really shown much else from her game though. And honestly is quite one-dimensional. She's very much a headhunter. She doesn't really even throw that many kicks at all. And is generally just looking to box and trade. And, just as far as her takedown defense go, it's not great. And she just does not look that good off her back either. Her opponent, McCann, not particularly great either, but she does like to move forward and will look to throw volume. And she kind of has to because she's got pretty crazy T-Rex arms. So McCann will look to have to get in distance to land her shots. And I feel she just is able to mix it up a lot better than Kim on the feet. And McCann is able to mix in some of the wrestling as well from time to time. McCann's takedown defense isn't great either. In fact, I think all her losses are against opponents who have been able to just out wrestle and out grapple her. But generally against strikers, McCann is able to just outwork them usually and mix in the wrestling enough to just win rounds that way. And for this matchup, I don't think it's any different. I think that McCann can win this just based off of volume and the fact that, she'll be hitting some takedowns. But I do see this being kind of back and forth on the feet. I can see Kim possibly catching McCann on a lot of entries, but I do think that McCann will land as well. McCann might be the quicker fighter in there. I just think that Kim might be a little slow, and the fact that her opponents are able to outland her a lot of the time might suggest that as well. But ultimately, I do feel that McCann will have a lot of success moving forward, throwing volume, and just mixing in the takedowns. As far as just being a decisionator, I think McCann does everything that you want a decisionator to do. She's really good at winning minutes, and the only time she's been beaten pretty thoroughly are against fighters who are able to just outmuscle her, kind of stifle her offense a bit by hitting takedowns of their own against McCann and just being able to control her and slowing her down that way. And I just don't see Kim being able to do that. Kim has primarily been a striker all of her career. She doesn't really go to the grappling at all. And if that's the case, I do see McCann being able to just run away with it, just in terms of, again, landing more volume and just possibly getting some control time with the wrestling as well. And on the ground, I think McCann might have a lot of success there just because I haven't really seen much from Kim off her back to make me feel confident that she's going to be able to keep the fight standing and just win there. So, yeah, I got McCann winning here. I think she wins a pretty comfortable decision. I don't think she'll run away with it or anything. Again, I do feel that on the feet it might be pretty competitive, very back and forth, but I am expecting McCann to hit some takedowns, maybe at the end of rounds, to look to put a stamp on rounds that way. And yeah, I've already got a unit placed on McCann already. I feel she's got all the tools here to win a pretty comfortable decision. Nothing too crazy though, because at the end of the day, this is a pretty low-level fight, and it is kind of predicated on McCann being able to hit some takedowns, because I do feel that that will ultimately put the stamp on the fight, because on the feet, it's going to be pretty back and forth, and without the takedowns, it's going to be like a 50-50 fight. So, yeah, just be careful here. But ultimately, I do have McCann winning, and I have her winning by decision. And in this matchup, we have David Zawada versus Alex Morono. This is a short notice fight, and as of right now, there's only one book that I see with a line out for it, and we have Morono at minus 185. Come back on Zawada is plus 155. And taking a look at Zawada, I feel like he's a pretty well-rounded fighter. I don't think he's terrible anywhere, but I don't think he's particularly great anywhere either. I mean, he was able to hang on the feet for a bit versus Li Jingliang and Danny Roberts, and was also able to pull off the sub against Abubakar Nurmagomedov, which some people will say is kind of fluky, but it's still a pretty good look, honestly. He also held his own pretty well against Ramazan Emeev, and Emeev, while I don't think he's a great fighter either, he's a fighter that's really hard to look good against. But, if we're being honest here, outside of catching Abubakar, Zawada's had a pretty mediocre UFC run. That said, though, he does fight pretty competitively. Outside of that late Li Jingliang KO, I think he's mostly been in pretty competitive fights, and even that fight against Li was pretty competitive up until that point. So overall, I do feel that Zawada's a decent fighter. He just hasn't really been getting good matchups or anything. His opponent Morono, coming in short notice, he's one of these fighters who just really seem to embody just hard work and dedication. Kind of the Rock Lee of mid-level MMA. The guy's not the most talented or athletically gifted, but definitely puts in the work and is out here living his dream, honestly. During his time in the UFC, I mean, he's accumulated pretty respectable record. Granted, it's largely against mid-low-level fighters, but, it's still pretty impressive, how many wins he's kind of accrued at the UFC level. His striking's kind of just meat and potatoes, nothing fancy, nothing crazy, but he does seem to have a bit of power. The timing is good, and generally has shown, pretty good technique. His cardio is okay, although it does seem like he slows down a bit in fights. His takedown defense isn't great, though, and it does look like he struggles off his back a bit, which, is a little troubling since I think that Zawada is a decent grappler, although we haven't seen Zawada really attack the grappling too aggressively. But taking a look at this matchup, I do favor Zawada a little bit more here. Like, stylistically, I feel that, on the feet, it should be kind of competitive. I may lean Morono a little bit more on the feet, but not by a wide margin. I think that Zawada's no slouch on the feet. He can definitely keep it competitive, but where I do see Zawada having the advantages on the ground, I think that Zawada is the much more competent grappler. And if he's, attacking takedowns or, is looking to grapple, I do feel that he should be able to get a bit of control time and maybe even kind of wear on the cardio of Morono a bit, since Morono is going to be coming in short notice, and I don't think that Morono typically has the greatest cardio either, especially when in grappling heavy fights. So, I've already actually bet Zawada. I've already put a unit on him at plus 155. I feel this should be close to a pick'em sort of fight, but, honestly, I do lean Zawada a little bit more. So I've already bet him. I don't know if I'll tip it yet since there's only one book that's got it out. So I think once it opens up on a few other books, I'll probably tip it. I think there is solid value on Zawada at plus odds, honestly. So not too much more to say here. I just feel that this should be a pretty close fight, and what I think will really put Zawada over the edge is going to be the grappling, and the fact that Morono is coming in short notice, I think it will definitely play in the favor of Zawada. So I have Zawada winning here, and I got Zawada winning by decision. Moving right along, we have Paddy Pimblett versus Luigi Vendramini. And Pimblett's the minus 135 favorite. Comeback on Vendramini is plus 115. And let's start with Pimblett first, who does appear to be a bit of a fan favorite. The guy's got kind of funny hair. He's got a pretty aggressive submission style of fighting. I guess people like him. He is primarily a grappler. He will look to get the fight to the ground as soon as possible. Will even look to jump guard occasionally, and once the fight is on the ground, he is pretty relentless there. He's very active with the sub attempts, and have actually seen him lose position because he gets a little over aggressive there, but he is really good in scrambles, and it's just generally a very high paced grappler. That said, though, I do think he slows down a bit, especially as the fight starts to drag on, but he also has fought in 5-rounders as well, and even though he looks pretty tired in some of those fights, he is able to gut it out. As far as his striking goes, I don't think he's bad offensively, but, he is very hittable. And, that's only made worse when he starts to slow down, as he usually puts on a pretty, high-paced grappling match. And when that happens, it just makes him a little more vulnerable on the feet. Fortunately for him, I don't know if his opponent, Vendramini, is going to be able to really take advantage of that, because with Vendramini, I feel I think he's got a grappling base as well, but Vendramini does seem a little more well-rounded. Vendramini definitely seems a little more comfortable on the feet than Pimblett, and does seem to have a little more power as well. And while Vendramini does have that grappling base, I haven't really seen too much from it. It's just based off of what I've heard from commentators. Truthfully, it's kind of hard to get a good read on Vendramini. There's just not a ton of footage on him. Like in his UFC debut, he was able to take the back of Zaleski before getting just knocked out in the second round. And then in his second fight in the UFC against Ayari, he gets the early finish. And then most recently against Ziem, Ziem was able to kind of beat him at distance with the striking. But Vendramini was able to utilize his grappling a bit to kind of make the fight a lot closer than it should. But ultimately, he did lose that fight, and just outside of these fights, I haven't really seen too much more from Vendramini. But taking a look at this matchup, I do have to favor Pimblett a bit more. I really like how aggressive he is with the grappling, and generally in these fights, I do think that the judges will score the grappling a bit more for some of these guys, especially in a fight where I feel like it's generally going to be pretty uneventful. I think that, Pimblett, he's going to get a lot of control time. He's going to be the one maybe looking to advance positions, maybe, landing a bit of ground and pound. So I do have to kind of favor him a little more in that regards. But again, we haven't seen enough from Vendramini to say that Pimblett is going to have an easy time with the grappling with Vendramini. I don't think we've really seen too much defensive grappling from Vendramini, like, whatsoever. So for all we know, Vendramini might have great takedown defense, or maybe he's a good enough defensive grappler to be able to sweep Pimblett and possibly just reverse him, get on top of Pimblett, and get a bit of control time himself, right? And as far as the striking goes, I do favor Vendramini a little bit more. I definitely feel that Vendramini is much more comfortable on the ground, and I think Vendramini will likely have a bit more power with the striking as well. So if Vendramini is able to keep the fight standing, I do favor him a little bit more. But ultimately, I do have to side with Pimblett here. I think that he's just much more consistent with his game plan in looking to attack the grappling and wrestling. So I got Pimblett here. I think he should be able to just outwork Vendramini with the grappling for at least 2 rounds. So I do have Pimblett winning a decision here. Might actually look to put a small bet on him. Minus 135, I think, is pretty reasonable. I wouldn't go too heavy on it just because there's a bit of unknowns in regards to Vendramini. He could be just a fantastic grappler and just put up a lot more resistance than we expect. But I think that Pimblett should generally be able to bank 2 rounds with the grappling. So yeah, I got Pimblett here, and I have Pimblett winning by decision. And in the next fight, we have Khalil Rountree versus Modestas Bukauskas, and Bukauskas is the minus 155 favorite. Come back on Rountree is plus 135. And let's start with Rountree first. So Rountree, arguably just one of the most inconsistent fighters on the roster, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is he either wins resoundingly or just gets absolutely thrashed. Because you look at his fights against Daniel Jolly, Paul Craig, Gokhan Saki, just crazy knockouts early, and then he's able to just put on an absolutely dominant performance against Anders. But then you get his performances against the likes of Walker and Kudalaba, who are able to finish him in just absolutely brutal fashion. And then you get his performance also against Mikhail Oleg-Jacek and Marcin Nochin-Prachnio, who's able to just basically dance circles around Rountree the whole fight. So, man, the guy just is super inconsistent. But, as far as what he brings to the table, I think he's just got really big power, very explosive striking, but, bad cardio, obviously. That's kind of the trade-off with, these big power guys. And all of his wins are pretty much just first-round knockouts, aside from the Anders win, which kind of seems like an anomaly in hindsight. But, that is definitely a bit concerning. And, at this point in his career, I don't know if he's going to be adding too much more to his game. I think he'll primarily just be like a round 1 knockout or bust sort of fighter. His opponent, Modestas Bukauskas, is primarily a striker as well. Does seem to have some pretty heavy hands of his own. Does load up a bit, but is much better at mixing in the kicks and just mixing up his strikes overall. He's got a ton of finishes on the regional scene as well, but only one in the UFC, although I'm not going to completely write him off just yet, because if you look at some of the matchups he's had, one was against Jimmy Crute, where Crute was able to just land a bomb on him early, and that I don't know how often that happens, but yeah, I think if we let that fight play out, it'd be very interesting, although I'd assume Jimmy Crute would probably get his wrestling going a little later in the fight. And then his most recent fight was against Mikhail Oleg-Jacek, who is a very pressure-heavy fighter. And that whole fight, Bukauskas was pretty much on his back foot. And, he did pretty well that fight, all things considered. But, as far as Bukauskas' takedown defense goes, it does seem pretty solid. I mean, I'd say most of his regional tape is basically him just making his opponents work for the takedown, him being able to either deny them or, Bukauskas eventually working his way back to the feet and then getting the finish as his opponents start to tire. But, taking a look at this matchup, I do think it's pretty straightforward. Rountree, he is dangerous on the feet in the first round. But if Rountree isn't able to get the knockout in that first round, I do see Bukauskas winning rounds 2 and 3 pretty comfortably. I do like the body kick that Bukauskas likes to throw. I do think that that's going to be it's going to pay dividends later in the fight as Roundtree starts to tire, which, he has shown to do. And, just honestly, outside of that first round, I just don't really see Roundtree being able to do too much. So, the pick here for me is going to be Bukauskas. I think he could win a pretty comfortable 29-28 decision, possibly even get a late round KO if Roundtree is using a lot of energy in the earlier rounds. However, I just see Bukauskas being able to outwork Roundtree in the later rounds. As far as bets go, I feel there might still be a little bit of value on Bukauskas at -155. Maybe not a lot too much more, but this is a fight where I feel you could probably just take Bukauskas money line and then maybe hedge with Roundtree first round knockout. But I do think Bukauskas takes this. So the pick for me is Bukauskas, and I have him winning by decision. And in the co-main event, we have a short notice fight between Tom Aspinall and Sergey Spivak. Aspinall initially set to go up against another prospect in Sergey Pavlovich, but in steps another Sergey Spivak, another prospect himself actually, coming in short notice to take on Tom Aspinall. And as it stands right now, there is actually the line out on this fight. Aspinall -275, Spivak +215. So right off the bat, I do feel the line is a bit wide. So Tom Aspinall, he's got good boxing, he's got good hands, good power. Does seem competent in the jiu-jitsu, which I'll get into in a second here. But with Aspinall, he definitely seems like a pretty dangerous striker. All of his wins are pretty much in the first round, which is impressive, but that is always a concern with some of these younger prospects who, get a lot of these first round finishes. He definitely passes the eye test, but I do feel he is still somewhat unproven. His best win is over Andrei Arlovsky, where Aspinall did come in guns blazing that first round. Probably had Arlovsky hurt in there. But, something to note in that fight was that after Aspinall kind of just had that adrenaline dump, he had to basically just clinch up with Arlovsky and just hang out in the clinch for a couple minutes to kind of to rest himself up a little bit, right? And then early in the second round for that fight, he's able to shoot a takedown on Arlovsky. Arlovsky definitely did not see that coming. Arlovsky also ends up giving his back, and Aspinall is able to sink in the choke. So, good on him for having the wherewithal to find that choke. And, that kind of goes back to my point. I do feel that Aspinall, maybe he's got some decent jiu-jitsu, but I wouldn't take too much from that. I feel that was more of a mental lapse on Arlovsky's part. Maybe he wasn't expecting the choke. He just kind of gave up his back thinking he'd just be able to stand up. But Aspinall definitely showing, he's able to think on his feet there and sinking the rear naked choke. So, I do feel that Aspinall's got a bright future and, he definitely passes the eye test. But I do ultimately feel he is still somewhat unproven despite having a really solid win over Andrei Arlovsky. But, outside of that, he's primarily just crushed cans. And his opponent, Spivak, is actually going to be the younger fighter coming into this, but does actually have a bit more UFC experience. Not much striking to speak of for Spivak, but the guy is primarily a grinder. Will look to get the fight to the ground. He will look to accumulate control time, work the ground and pound, potentially find the sub also, but does look like he's a little more aggressive with the ground and pound than he is with the submissions on the ground. But by and large, he is more of just like a wet blanket sort of fighter, someone who will just look to control you for the most part and kind of work in the ground and pound to stay busy so the ref doesn't, break them up. Spivak is a pretty solid grappler, but I feel he's gotten pretty favorable matchups as well. I mean, he's fought other UFC vets in Oleinik and Tai Tuivasa, which are solid wins, but, Tuivasa doesn't really have much of a ground game to speak of. And then Oleinik, way past his prime at this point, doesn't really pose much of a threat to Spivak because Oleinik is mainly a submission guy. But, if Spivak's the one on top, if he's the one initiating the grappling, he's generally going to be pretty safe from Oleinik. So while he does have two good wins over UFC vets, I don't think you can take too much from those. I think those are pretty favorable matchups for him. And then his other wins are against Jared Vanderaa and Carlos Felipe, who are, in my opinion, pretty low-level heavyweights. And then he's also got 2 losses, one to Tybura, one to Harris. So Tybura was basically just able to out-grapple Spivak there. Tybura basically just a more advanced Spivak, essentially. Also a grappler, but just way more experienced and way bigger, stronger in there. And basically just out-Spivaked Spivak, right? So, can't hold that against him too much. That was a rough matchup for him. And then he gets starched by Walt Harris. And that's definitely going to be a concern coming into this fight. One of Spivak's losses being by knockout, Aspinall being very dangerous in the first round. I can definitely see Aspinall just dropping the hammer on Spivak early. But if that doesn't happen, this could potentially be a very dicey fight for Aspinall. We haven't really seen too much from his defensive grappling, but you do have to assume that Spivak is going to look to get this fight to the ground. He's not going to want to keep it standing. I don't think Spivak's stand-up is that great. In fact, I think Oleinik, whose stand-up isn't great, was giving Spivak some trouble. So Spivak definitely going to look to get the fight to the ground. And when he does get it there, he could potentially have a bit of success. Just look to wear on Aspinall, tire him out, and just kind of take away some of the power and speed that Aspinall has. So, this is a pretty tough matchup to really predict for me because I do feel that Aspinall's got a pretty sizable advantage on the feet, but we just haven't seen enough of his takedown defense or just his bottom game in general to really be confident that he can keep the fight standing. But, if he is able to keep it standing, I'm pretty confident he should be able to touch up Spivak, possibly even knock him out. But if that doesn't happen, I can definitely see Spivak just grinding out a very low-paced, very boring decision. But ultimately, I am going to side with Aspinall here. He's the one who's had the full camp, and fights do start on the feet, so I give him the advantage there. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that his takedown defense and get-up game is serviceable to the point where he'll keep it on the feet long enough in this fight to win a decision or get the knockout. But from a betting perspective, I do feel that the value is going to be on Spivak. I think that, you definitely do have to favor Aspinall, but I just don't think he should be this big of a favorite, especially since Aspinall has generally been pretty untested against grapplers and hasn't really been tested outside of that first round. And that's really the only thing keeping me off of Aspinall, mainly. The guy's just got a few question marks around his game. But all in all, I do feel he's a solid prospect. So, if this is a striking affair, I do think he wins pretty resoundingly. But, as far as the pick goes, I'm going to go with Aspinall. I can see him getting the knockout or just winning a pretty comfortable decision on the feet. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Spivak is able to just grind his way to a decision. And in the main event, we have Derek Brunson versus Darren Till, and Till's the minus 175 favorite. Come back on Brunson is plus 150, and we have a pretty interesting matchup here. I think your typical striker versus grappler matchup. Brunson being the wrestler here, although he does have a pretty deadly overhand right, versus Till, the striker. So let's take a look at Brunson first, and Brunson, he's on a pretty solid 4-fight win streak. Held the gate against the likes of Theodoru, Heinisch, Shabazian, and Holland. All really solid wins in my opinion. And like I've said before, he's got that wrestling base and has definitely developed a very dangerous overhand. He's not a fantastic striker by any means, but he does have power. And, there was a time when he was just winging overhands and just knocking guys out left and right. Although I do have to say it was against kind of older fighters, but still very impressive that he had just a pretty crazy knockout streak going. But, as of late, he's gotten better at slowing it down and mixing in the wrestling. But all in all, I do feel he's still a pretty limited striker. And as far as this matchup goes, I definitely feel that he'll need to mix in the wrestling because he'll be going up against Till, who is primarily a striker. And I'd say Till is a pretty dangerous striker himself. He likes to pressure opponents and look for the counter. Generally, he won't really like to lead unless maybe he's got his opponents hurt. So for that reason, the volume is going to be a bit low. That said, though, his opponents generally will have low volume as well when they're fighting Till, just because they're not going to want to throw as much and create as many or leave as many openings for Till to capitalize on. So for that reason, Till's fights, unless there's a knockout, tend to be a bit slower paced and, potentially, uneventful at times. So that's kind of just Till's style. And unless there's a finish materializing or unless there's a really big skill gap in the striking, his fights, generally do tend to play out pretty close. Now, the big thing I was looking for when doing tape on Till was to see how his takedown defense looked and just how he looked off his back. And, if I'm being honest, there's not a lot of tape on that. I know he got knocked down by Woodley, and, that was a fight where he was hurt. I don't think he was really looking to get up. I think he was just looking to recover mainly. So I don't think that's a performance that you could take too much from. And then before that, he was taken down a couple of times by Whitaker, but I don't think Whitaker was really looking to have prolonged wrestling or grappling exchanges. I think he just wanted to mix it in there to kind of, keep Till on his toes a bit. And then, I think you'd have to go all the way back to his fight with, or Till's fight with Dalby, where he'd given up takedowns and some control time. But, that was a fight where Till had kind of gassed himself out a bit early in the fight. And, this was still pretty early in his career. So another performance where I don't think you can take too much from. But, from what I have seen lately in the very limited footage, it does seem that Till has pretty good takedown defense and is pretty good at working his way back up to his feet. He's definitely going to be much harder to take down and keep down than Brunson's most recent opponent in Kevin Holland. Holland just showed absolutely zero get-ups that game, and I don't think that's really a performance you could take too much from in regards to Brunson. I don't think that's something that Brunson can really replicate because Vettori pretty much had the exact same game plan going in against Holland and was able to do pretty much the exact same thing. So I really don't think that Brunson will be able to pull that off again here against Till. And I do think that Brunson may be able to get a couple takedowns, but I don't see him having too much success holding Till down. And I feel that one aspect of Brunson's game that hasn't really reared its ugly head is the cardio. And while Brunson had a lot of success with the wrestling against Holland and Shabazian, Holland wasn't really putting up much resistance, and then Shabazian probably has even worse cardio than Brunson. So I don't think that Brunson's really been pushed all that much in two of those wins, even though he did attack the wrestling pretty aggressively in those fights. I think that Till will put up a lot more resistance and will pace himself a lot better than some of Brunson's previous opponents. And then on top of that, I do feel that Till's striking is still very potent. I don't know how you'd rate it against the likes of Holland or even Shabazian, but I do think that Till is live for the knockout here if the fight is on the feet for extended periods. Even if he isn't getting the knockout, I do think that he'll be finding the target on Brunson quite a bit here. So for that reason, I do have to favor Till a bit. I think that, he could win a decision. He could get the knockout. But, overall, I am going to favor Till to be able to keep this fight standing long enough to either, win on the cards or get the knockout. But again, like I said before with Till, the guy does fight close, and this could just be one of those fights where there's not a lot going on. Maybe Till doesn't want to engage because he doesn't want to get caught by an overhand by Brunson, or maybe he doesn't want to overextend and get taken down. And similarly, I see Brunson maybe being a little tentative as well, not looking to engage because Till does have a really dangerous left hand. And so for that reason, I don't know if I really want to take Till at minus 175. It's just with how low volume and how close Till sometimes fights, he's liable to just lose a very close split decision. So I do think that's definitely in the realm of possibility, but I can also see just Till being the much quicker, more technical striker in there. He might see everything coming from Brunson, be able to just catch him on the entries and be able to just touch him up. I'm leaning more towards the latter, but I'm not super confident in it. I can definitely see Till having a lot of success on the feet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if this was a very low volume affair. But ultimately, I am going to side with Till here. I do think he's the better striker, and I do think he's got good enough defensive grappling to keep this fight standing and land the cleaner, harder shots. So again, the pick is Till, and I'll have him winning by a decision. And that will do it for this card. Shout out to anyone who's made it this far already, especially after just such a shitty card I had in the previous event. I hope you guys are able to still find a bit of value out of this content. Maybe a few tidbits of information I'm able to bring to the table here. The bets have been absolutely atrocious for me this year. Just pretty inconsistent. Lots of ups and downs this year. Hopefully you guys are still finding some of the breakdowns useful, though. In any case, I do want to end the podcast on a lighter note, and looking ahead, that Madison Square Garden card is looking absolutely stacked. They announced the fights, I think, sometime last night during the fight night card. So obviously we have our 2 title fights, Usman, Covington, Rose, and Weili, and even the rest of the card is just super stacked. These fights could potentially be just headliners for fight nights, right? Gaethje, Chandler, Strickland, Rockhold, the return of Luke Rockhold, and then Edgar versus Vera. This is going to be a super dope card to tape, and I'm really looking forward to breaking this down, actually. And just doing a quick look ahead and my first take on some of these fights, because I'm honestly very excited to talk about some of these fights. Usman, Covington, Usman I think should definitely be favored, but I feel like the line is still a bit wide considering how close the first fight was. Usman being on that knockout streak he's on now, I think definitely inflates the price a little bit. Although, those knockouts cannot be denied. But ultimately, I do feel the line is a little wide, and I might actually have to do a little sprinkle on Covington. I'm going to do a little more tape, but I do feel the line is wide here. And then Rose, Weili, people are going to be upset about Esparza not getting the title shot. And look, I do feel that Esparza does deserve the title shot, but if I'm being honest here, I'd much rather see Weili versus Rose over Rose versus Esparza. Honestly, I feel that a lot of people that are upset about it are either Weili haters or they're big Rose fans and they want an easy matchup for Rose. But honestly, this is just such a much more exciting matchup. I'm very interested to see how this fight plays out. I know Weili got starched early in that last fight, but I think if this fight goes 5 rounds, I do think it's going to be a very competitive fight. And, I do think it is a bit short-sighted on the UFC's end to give Weili the immediate rematch. But, I'd much rather see this rematch take place now than in like a year and a half, 2 years, when I think Weili's going to be out of her prime. Rose is going to be in her prime. And it's going to be, I think, a much more lopsided matchup than it is now. Like, I feel the rematch happening sooner is going to give us a much more exciting fight than if Weili had to climb her way back through the ranks and then get the title shot in 2 years when she's going to be a bit past her prime. Like, I think she's going to be 34, 35 if that happens. And then Gaethje Chandler, a very fun fight. Man, this one's going to be tough to call. I do think that Chandler's got the power to knock Gaethje out, but I think outside of that first round, it's going to be a rough one for Chandler. And this being a 3-rounder, the wrestling might be in play for Chandler as well, but man, Chandler's 35. He's definitely getting up there in age. But I feel this should be a pretty fun fight regardless. Whitman's going to have his hands full. 3 fighters in 3 back-to-back events. And then again, Sean Strickland, Luke Rockhold. Going to be a rough one for Rockhold coming back from such a long layoff against someone like Strickland, who's such an aggressive pressure fighter and he's got some power too. So I'm definitely leaning Strickland for this one. I think he gets it done on the feet. And then Frankie Edgar, Marlon Vera. So once again, they're feeding Frankie Edgar to the wolves here. Vera, I do favor him to win. He's going to be the much bigger, I think stronger, and just the younger, fresher fighter in there. Historically, he does drop the first round, and that's always a bit dicey against, a vet like Edgar. But, I do think he could win the second and third round pretty resoundingly. Might even get the finish on Edgar. But yeah, super dope card so far. I'm ready to lose a bit more money on it. No, I'm just kidding. But that'll do it for this podcast. I know nobody asked for that, but just wanted to do a little look ahead for a very exciting card. Didn't want to end the podcast on such a downer. But I hope you guys had better success with some of your bets. And I'll catch you guys next week for the Smith versus Spann card.